Welcome back to Reading Books in Bed. Today we are up to chapter 5 of The Go-Getter by Peter B. Kyne. There'll be a link down below where you can get a copy yourself if you would like, or a free Kindle version. If you missed the previous chapters, you can start at chapter 1. There will be a link right here. Chapter 5. A week from the succeeding Saturday, Mr. Skinner did not come down to the office, but a telephone message from his home informed the chief clerk that Mr. Skinner was at home and somewhat indisposed. The chief clerk was to advise Mr. Peck that he, Mr. Skinner, had contemplated having a conference with the latter that day, but that his indisposition would prevent this. Mr. Skinner hoped to be feeling much better tomorrow, and since he was very desirous of a conference with Mr. Peck before the latter should depart on his next selling pilgrimage on Monday, would Mr. Peck be good enough to call at Mr. Skinner's house at 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon? Mr. Peck sent back word that he would be there at the appointed time, and was rewarded with Mr. Skinner's thanks via the chief clerk. Promptly at 1 o'clock the following day, Bill Peck reported at the general manager's house. He found Mr. Skinner in bed, reading the paper and looking surprisingly well. He trusted Mr. Skinner felt better than he looked. Mr. Skinner did, and at once entered into a discussion of the new customers, other prospects he particularly desired Mr. Peck to approach, new business to be investigated, and further details without end. And in the midst of this conference, Cappy Riggs telephoned. A portable telephone stood on a commode beside Mr. Skinner's bed, so the latter answered immediately. Comrade Peck watched Skinner listen attentively for fully 2 minutes, then heard him say, "Mr. Ricks, I'm terribly sorry. I'd love to do this errand for you, but really I'm under the weather. In fact, I'm in bed as I speak to you now. But Mr. Peck is here with me, and I'm sure he'll be very happy to attend to the matter for you." "By all means," Bill Peck hastened to assure the general manager. "Who does Mr. Ricks want killed, and where will he have the body delivered?" "Ha ha ha ha." Mr. Skinner had a singularly annoying, mirthless laugh, as if he begrudged himself such an unheard-of indulgence. "Mr. Peck says," he informed Cappy, "that he'll be delighted to attend to the matter for you. He wants to know whom you want killed, and where you wish the body delivered. Ha ha ha, Peck. Mr. Ricks will speak to you." Bill Peck took the telephone. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ricks." "Hello, old soldier. What are you doing this afternoon?" "Nothing, after I conclude my conference with Mr. Skinner. By the way, he has just given me a most handsome boost in salary, for which I am most appreciative. I feel, however, despite Mr. Skinner's graciousness, that you have put in a kind word for me with him, and I want to thank you." "Tut, tut, not a peep out of you, sir, not a peep. You get nothing for nothing from Skinner or me. However, in view of the fact that you're feeling kindly toward me this afternoon, I wish you'd do a little errand for me. I can't send a boy, and I hate to make a messenger out of you, that is, I have no false pride, Mr. Ricks." "Thank you, Bill. Glad you feel that way about it. Bill, I was prowling around town this afternoon after church, and down in a store on Sutter Street between Stockton and Powell Street, on the right-hand side as you face Market Street, I saw a blue vase in a window. I have a weakness for vases, Bill. I'm a sharp on them, too. Now this vase I saw isn't very expensive as vases go. In fact, I wouldn't buy it for my collection, but one of the finest and sweetest ladies of my acquaintance has the mate to that blue vase I saw in the window, and I know she'd be prouder than Punch if she had 2 of them, one for each side of her drawing-room mantel, understand? Now I'm leaving for this Southern Pacific Depot at 8 o'clock tonight, bound for Santa Barbara to attend her wedding anniversary tomorrow night. I forget what anniversary it is, Bill, but I have been informed by my daughter that I'll be very much de trop if I send her any present other than something in porcelain or china or cloisonne. Well, Bill, this crazy little blue vase just fills the order, understand?" "Yes, sir." You feel that it would be most graceful on your part if you could bring this little blue vase down to Santa Barbara with you tonight. You have to have it tonight because if you wait until the store opens on Monday, the vase will reach your hostess 24 hours after her anniversary party. Exactly, Bill. Now, I've simply got to have that vase. If I had discovered it yesterday, I wouldn't be asking you to get it for me today, Bill. Please do not make any explanations or apologies, Mr. Ricks. You have described the vase. No, you haven't. What sort of blue is it? How tall is it? What is approximately its greatest diameter? Does it set on a base, or does it not? Is it a solid blue, or is it figured? It's a cloisonne vase, Bill. Sort of old Dutch blue or Delft with some oriental funny business on it. I couldn't describe it exactly, but it has some birds and flowers on it. It's about a foot tall and 4 inches in diameter and sets on a teak wood base. Very well, sir, you shall have it. And you'll deliver it to me in Stateroom A, Car 7, aboard the train, at 3rd and Townsend Streets, at 7:55 tonight. Yes, sir. Thank you, Bill. The expense will be trifling. Collect it from the cashier in the morning and tell him to charge it to my account. And Cappy hung up. At once Mr. Skinner took up the thread of the interrupted conference, and it was not until 3 o'clock that Bill Peck left his house and proceeded downtown to locate Cappy Rick's blue vase. He proceeded to the block in Sutter Street between Stockton and Powell Streets, and although he walked patiently up one side of the street and down the other, not a single vase of any description showed in any shop window, nor could he find a single shop where such a vase as Cappy had described might perchance be displayed for sale. I think the old boy has erred in the coordinates of the target, Bill Peck concluded, or else I misunderstood him. I'll telephone his house and ask him to repeat them. He did, but nobody was at home except a Swedish maid, and all she knew was that Mr. Ricks was out, and the hour of his return was unknown. So Mr. Peck went back to Sutter Street and scoured once more every shop window in the block. Then he scouted 2 blocks above Powell and 2 blocks below Stockton. Still the blue vase remained invisible. So he transferred his search to a corresponding area on Bush Street, and when that failed, he went painstakingly over 4 blocks of Post Street. He was still without results when he moved 1 block further west and 1 further south and discovered the blue vase in a huge plate glass window of a shop on Geary Street near Grant Avenue. He surveyed it critically and was convinced that it was the object he sought. He tried the door, but it was locked, as he had anticipated it would be. So he kicked the door and raised an infernal racket, hoping against hope that the noise might bring a watchman from the rear of the building. In vain. He backed out to the edge of the sidewalk and read the sign over the door. B. Cohen's Art Shop. This was a start, so Mr. Peck limped over to the Palace Hotel and procured a telephone directory. By actual count, there were 19 B. Cohens scattered throughout the city. So before commencing to call the 19, Bill Peck borrowed the city directory from the hotel clerk and scanned it for the particular B. Cohen who owned the art shop. His search availed him nothing. B. Cohen was listed as an art dealer at the address where the blue vase reposed in the show window. That was all. I suppose he's a commuter, Mr. Peck concluded, and at once proceeded to procure directories of the adjacent cities of Berkeley, Oakland, and Alameda. They were not available, so in despair he changed $1 into 5-cent pieces, sought a telephone booth, and commenced calling up all the B. Cohens in San Francisco. Of the 19, 4 did not answer. 3 were temporarily disconnected. 6 replied in Yiddish. 5 were not the B. Cohen he sought, and 1 swore he was Irish and that his name was spelled Cohan, and pronounced with an accent on both syllables. The B. Cohens residing in Berkeley, Oakland, Alameda, San Rafael, Sausalito, Mill Valley, San Mateo, Redwood City, and Palo Alto were next telephoned to. And when this long and expensive task was done, ex-private Bill Peck emerged from the telephone booth, wringing wet with perspiration and as irritable as a clucking hen. Once outside the hotel, He raised his haggard face to heaven, and dumbly queried of the Almighty what he meant by saving him from quick death on the field of honor, only to condemn him to be talked to death by B. Cohens in civil life. It was now 6 o'clock. Suddenly Peck had an inspiration. Was the name spelled Cohen, Cohan, Cone, or Cohen? If I have to take a Jewish consensus again tonight, I'll die, he told himself desperately, and went back to the art shop. The sign reads, B. Cohen's Art Shop. Wish I knew a bootlegger's joint, poor Peck complained. I'm pretty far gone in a little wood alcohol. Couldn't hurt me much now. Why, I could have sworn that name was spelled with an E. It seems to me I noted that particularly. He went back to the hotel telephone booth and commenced calling up all the B. Cohens in town. There were 8 of them, and 6 of them were out. One was maudlin with liquor, and the other was very deaf and shouted unintelligibly. Peace hath its barbarities no less than war. Mr. Peck sighed. He changed a $20 bill into nickels, dimes, and quarters, returned to the hot, ill-smelling telephone booth, and proceeded to lay down a barrage of telephone calls to the B. Cohens in all towns of any importance contiguous to San Francisco Bay. And he was lucky. On the 6th call, he located the particular B. Cohen in San Rafael, only to be informed by Mr. Cohen's cook that Mr. Cohen was dining at the home of a Mr. Simmons in Mill Valley. There were 3 Mr. Simmons in Mill Valley, and Peck called them all before connecting with the right one. Yes, Mr. B. Cohen was there. Who wished to speak to him? Mr. Heck? Oh, Mr. Lake. A silence. Then Mr. Cohen says he doesn't know any Mr. Lake and wants to know the nature of your business. He's dining and doesn't like to be disturbed unless the matter is of grave importance. Tell him Mr. Peck wishes to speak to him on a matter of very great importance, wailed the ex-private. Mr. Metz? Mr. Ben Metz? No, Peck. P-E-C-K. D-E-C-K? No, P. C? P. Oh, yes, E. E what? C-K. Oh, yes, Mr. Eckstein. Call Cohen to the phone, or I'll go over there on the next boat and kill you, you damned idiot, shrieked Peck. Tell him his store is on fire. That message was evidently delivered, for almost instantly Mr. B. Cohen was puffing and spluttering into the phone. Is that there fire, Marshal? He managed to articulate. Listen, Mr. Cohen, your store is not on fire, but I had to say so in order to get you to the telephone. I am Mr. Peck, a total stranger to you. You have a blue vase in your shop window on Geary Street in San Francisco. I want to buy it, and I want to buy it before 7:45 tonight. I want you to come across the bay and open the store and sell me that vase. Such a business! What you think I am, crazy? No, Mr. Cohen, I do not. I'm the only crazy man talking. I'm crazy for that vase, and I've got to have it right away. You know what that vase costs? Mr. B. Cohen's voice dripped syrup. No, and I don't give a hoot what it costs. I want what I want when I want it. Do I get it? Well, let me see. What time is it? A while silence, while B. Cohen evidently looked at his watch. It is now 7:15, Mr. Eckstein. When der next train from Mill Valley don't leave until 8 o'clock. That will get me to San Francisco at 8:55, and I am dining mit friends, and I've just finished my soup. To hell with your soup, I want that blue vase. Well, I tell you, Mr. Eckstein, if you got to have it, call up my head salesman, Herman Joost, in der Chilton Apartments, Prospect 3249, and tell him I said he should come down right away quick and sell you that blue vase. Goodbye, Mr. Eckstein. And B. Cohen hung up. Instantly, Peck called Prospect 3249 and asked for Herman Joost. Mr. Joost's mother answered. She was desolated because Herman was not at home. But vouchsafed the information that he was dining at the country club. Which country club? She did not know, so Peck procured from the hotel clerk a list of the country clubs in and around San Francisco and started calling them up. At 8 o'clock he was still being informed that Mr. Juice was not a member, that Mr. Luce wasn't in, that Mr. Coos had been dead 3 months, and that Mr. Boos had played but 8 holes when he received a telegram calling him back to New York. At the other clubs, Mr. Joust was unknown. "Licked," murmured Bill Peck, "but never let it be said that I didn't go down fighting. I'm going to heave a brick through that show window, grab the vase, and run with it." He engaged a taxicab and instructed the driver to wait for him at the corner of Geary and Stockton Streets. Also, he borrowed from the chauffeur a ball-peen hammer. When he reached the art shop of B. Cohn, however, a policeman was standing in the doorway, violating the general orders of a policeman on duty by surreptitiously smoking a cigar. "He'll nab me if I crack that window," the desperate Peck decided, and continued on down the street, crossed to the other side, and came back. It was now dark, and over the art shop B. Cohn's name burned in small red, white, and blue electric lights. And lo, it was spelled B. Cohen. Ex-Private William E. Peck sat down on a fire hydrant and cursed with rage. His weak leg hurt him too, and for some damnable reason, the stump of his left arm developed the feeling that his missing hand was itchy. "The world is filled with idiots," he raved furiously. "I'm tired, and I'm hungry. I skipped luncheon, and I've been too busy to think of dinner." He walked back to his taxicab and returned to the hotel where, hope springing eternal in his breast, he called Prospect 3249 again, and discovered that the missing Herman Joost had returned to the bosom of his family. To him the frantic Peck delivered the message of B. Cohn, whereupon the cautious Herman Joost replied that he would confirm the authenticity of the message by telephoning to Mr. Cohn at Mr. Simon's home in Mill Valley. If Mr. B. Cohn or Cohen confirmed Mr. Keck's story, the said Herman Joost would be at the store some time before 9 o'clock, and if Mr. Keck cared to, he might await him there. Mr. Keck said he would be delighted to wait for him there. At 9:15 Herman Joost appeared on the scene. On his way down the street he had taken the precaution to pick up a policeman and bring him along with him. The lights were switched on in the store, and Mr. Joost lovingly abstracted the blue vase from the window. "What's the cursed thing worth?" Peck demanded. $2,000. Mr. Joost replied without so much as the quiver of an eyelash. "Cash," he added, apparently as an afterthought. The exhausted Peck leaned against the sturdy guardian of the law and sighed. This was the final straw. He had about $10 in his possession. "You refuse absolutely to accept my check?" he quavered. "I don't know you, Mr. Peck," Herman Joost replied simply. "Where's your telephone?" Mr. Joost led Peck to the telephone, and the latter called up Mr. Skinner. "Mr. Skinner," he announced, "this is all that is mortal of Bill Peck speaking. I've got the store open, and for $2,000 cash I can buy the blue vase Mr. Ricks has set his heart upon." "Oh, Peck, dear fellow," Mr. Skinner purred sympathetically, "have you been all this time on that errand?" "I have, and I'm going to stick on the job until I deliver the goods. For God's sake, let me have $2,000 and bring it down to me at B. Cohen's art shop on Geary Street near Grant Avenue. I'm too utterly exhausted to go up after it." "My dear Mr. Peck, I haven't $2,000 in my house. That is too great a sum of money to keep on hand." "Well then, come downtown, open up this office safe, and get the money for me." "Time lock on the office safe, Peck. Impossible." "Well then, come downtown and identify me at hotels and cafes and restaurants so I can cash my own check." "Is your check good, Mr. Peck?" The flood of invective which had been accumulating in Mr. Peck's system all the afternoon now broke its bounds. He screamed at Mr. Skinner a blasphemous invitation to betake himself to the lower regions. "Tomorrow morning," he promised hoarsely, "I'll beat you to death with the stump of my left arm, you miserable, cold-blooded, lazy, shiftless slacker." He called up Cappy Rick's residence next and asked for Captain Matt Peasley, who he knew made his home with his father-in-law. Matt Peasley came to the telephone and listened sympathetically to Peck's tale of woe. "Peck, that's the worst outrage I ever heard of," he declared. The idea of setting you such a task. You take my advice and forget the blue vase." "I can't," Peck panted. "Mr. Ricks will feel mighty chagrined if I fail to get the vase to him. I wouldn't disappoint him for my right arm. He's been a dead game sport with me, Captain Peasley." "But it's too late to get the vase to him, Peck. He left the city at 8 o'clock, and it is now almost 9:30. "I know, but if I can secure legal possession of the vase, I'll get it to him before he leaves the train at Santa Barbara at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning." "How?" "There's a flying school out at the marina, and one of the pilots there is a friend of mine. He'll fly to Santa Barbara with me and the vase." "You're crazy." "I know it. Please lend me $2,000. "For what?" "To pay for the vase." "Now I know you're crazy, or drunk. Why, if Cappy Ricks ever forgot himself to the extent of paying $200 for a vase, he'd bleed to death in an hour." "Won't you let me have $2,000, Captain Peasley?" "I will not, Peck, old son. Go home and to bed, and forget it." "Please, you can cash your checks. You're known so much better than I, and it's Sunday night." "And it's a fine way to keep holy the Sabbath day," Matt Peasley retorted and hung up. "Well," Herman Joost queried, "do we stay here all night?" Bill Peck bowed his head. "Look here," he demanded suddenly. "Do you know a good diamond when you see it?" "I do," Herman Joost replied. "Will you wait here until I go to my hotel and get one?" "Sure." Bill Peck limped painfully away. 40 minutes later, he returned with a platinum ring set with diamonds and sapphires. "What are they worth?" he demanded. Herman Joost looked the ring over lovingly and appraised it conservatively at $2,500. "Take it as security for the payment of my check. Give me a receipt for it, and after my check has gone through clearing, I'll come back and get the ring." 15 minutes later, with the blue vase packed in excelsior and reposing in a stout cardboard box, Bill Peck entered a restaurant and ordered dinner. When he had dined, he engaged a taxi and was driven to the flying field at the marina. From the night watchman, he ascertained the address of his pilot friend, and at midnight, with his friend at the wheel, Bill Peck and his blue vase soared up into the moonlight and headed south. An hour and a half later, they landed in a stubble field in Salinas Valley, and, bidding his friend goodbye, Bill Peck trudged across to the railroad tracks and sat down. When the train bearing Cappy Ricks came roaring down the valley, Peck twisted a Sunday paper with which he had provided himself into an improvised torch, which he lighted. Standing between the rails, he swung the flaming paper frantically. The train slid to a halt. A brakeman opened a vestibule door, and Bill Peck stepped wearily aboard. "What do you mean by flagging this train?" the brakeman demanded angrily as he signaled the engineer to proceed. "Got a ticket?" "No, but I've got the money to pay my way, and I flagged this train because I wanted to change my method of travel. I'm looking for a man in stateroom A of car 7, and if you try to block me, there'll be murder done." "That's right, take advantage of your half-portion arm and abuse me," Brakeman retorted bitterly. "Are you looking for that little old man with the Henry Clay collar and the white mutton-chop whiskers?" "I certainly am." "Well, he was looking for you just before we left San Francisco. He asked me if I had seen a one-armed man with a box under his good arm. I'll lead you to him." A prolonged ringing at Cappy's stateroom door brought the old gentleman to the entrance in his nightshirt. "Very sorry to have disturbed you, Mr. Ricks," said Bill Peck, "but the fact is, there were so many Cones and Cohans, and it was such a job to dig up $2,000 that I failed to connect with you at 7:45 last night as per orders. It was absolutely impossible for me to accomplish the task within the time limit set, but I was resolved that you should not be disappointed. Here's the vase. The shop wasn't within 4 blocks of where you thought it was, sir, but I'm sure I found the right vase. It ought to be. It cost enough and was hard enough to get, so it should be precious enough to form a gift for any friend of yours." Cappy Ricks stared at Bill Peck as if the latter were a wraith. "By the 12 ragged apostles," he murmured. "By the holy pink-toed prophet, we changed the sign on you, and we stacked the Cohens on you, and we set a policeman to guard the shop to keep you from breaking the window, and we made you dig up $2,000 on Sunday night in a town where you were practically unknown, and while you missed the train at 8 o'clock, you overtake it at 2 o'clock in the morning and deliver the blue vase. Come in and rest your poor old game leg, Bill. Brakeman, I'm much obliged to you." Bill Peck entered and slumped wearily down on the settee. "So it was a plant?" he cracked, and his voice trembled with rage. "Well, sir, you're an old man, and you've been good to me, so I do not begrudge you your little joke. But, Mr. Ricks, I can't stand things like I used to. My leg hurts, my stump hurts, and my heart hurts." He paused, choking, and the tears of impotent rage filled his eyes. "You shouldn't treat me that way, sir," he complained presently. "I've been trained not to question orders, even when they seem utterly foolish to me. I've been trained to obey them on time if possible, but if impossible, to obey them anyhow. I've been taught loyalty to my chief, and I'm sorry my chief found it necessary to make a buffoon of me. I haven't had a very good time in the past 3 years, and you can pass your skunk spruce and larch rustic and short odd-length stock to some slacker like Skinner. And you'd better arrange to replace Skinner, because he's young enough to take a beating, and I'm going to give it to him. And it'll be a hospital job, sir." Cappy Ricks ruffled Bill Peck's aching head with a paternal hand. "Bill, old boy, it was cruel. Damnable cruel. But I had a big job for you, and I had to find out a lot of things about you before I entrusted you with that job. So I arranged to give you the degree of the blue vase, which is the supreme test of a go-getter. You thought you carried into this straight room a $2,000 vase, but between ourselves, what you really carried in was a $10,000 job as our Shanghai manager." "What?" "Every time I have to pick out a permanent holder of a job worth $10,000 or more, I give the candidate the degree of the blue vase," Cappy explained. "I've had 2 men out of a field of 15 deliver the vase, Bill." Bill Peck had forgotten his rage, but the tears of his recent fury still glistened in his bold blue eyes. "Thank you, sir. I forgive you, and I'll make good in Shanghai." "I know you will, Bill. Now tell me, son, weren't you tempted to quit when you discovered the almost insuperable obstacles I'd placed in your way?" "Yes, sir, I was. I wanted to commit suicide before I'd finished telephoning all the COHENS in the world. And when I started on the COHNS, well, it's this way, sir. I just couldn't quit because that would have been disloyal to a man I once knew." "Who was he?" Cappy demanded, and there was awe in his voice. "He was my brigadier, and he had a brigade motto: 'It shall be done.' When the divisional commander called him up and told him to move forward with his brigade and occupy a certain territory, our brigadier would say, 'Very well, sir, it shall be done.' If any officer in his brigade showed signs of flunking his job because it appeared impossible, the brigadier would just look at him once, and then that officer would remember the motto and go and do his job or die trying. In the Army, sir, the esprit de corps doesn't bubble up from the bottom. It filters down from the top. An organization is what its commanding officer is, neither better nor worse. In my company, when the top sergeant handed out a week of kitchen police to a buck, that buck was out of luck if he couldn't muster a grin and say, 'All right, sergeant, it shall be done.' The brigadier sent for me once and ordered me to go out and get a certain German sniper. I'd been pretty lucky. Some days I got enough for a mess, and he'd heard of me. He opened a map and said to me, 'Here's about where he holes up. Go get him, Private Peck.' Well, Mr. Ricks, I snapped into it and gave him a rifle salute and said, 'Sir, it shall be done.' And I'll never forget the look that man gave me. He came down to the field hospital to see me after I'd walked into one of those Austrian 88s. I knew my left wing was a total loss, and I suspected my left leg was about to leave me, and I was downhearted and I wanted to die. He came and bucked me up. He said, 'Why, Private Peck, you aren't half dead. In civil life, you're going to be worth half a dozen lives, aren't you?' But I was pretty far gone, and I told him I didn't believe it. So he gave me a hard look and said, Private Peck will do his utmost to recover, and as a starter he will smile. Of course, putting it in form of an order, I had to give him the usual reply, so I grinned and said, "Sir, it shall be done." He was quite a man, sir, and his brigade had a soul, his soul. I see, Bill. And his soul goes marching on, eh? Who was he, Bill? Bill Peck named his idol. By the 12 Ragged Apostles! There was awe in Cappy Rick's voice. There was reverence in his faded old eyes. Son, he continued gently, 25 years ago your brigadier was a candidate for an important job in my employ, and I gave him the degree of the blue vase. He couldn't get the vase legitimately, so he threw a cobblestone through the window, grabbed the vase, and ran a mile and a half before the police captured him. Cost me a lot of money to square the case and keep it quiet, but he was too good, Bill, and I couldn't stand in his way. I let him go forward to his destiny. But tell me, Bill, how did you get the $2,000 to pay for this vase? Once, said ex-Private Peck thoughtfully, the brigadier and I were first at a dugout entrance. It was a headquarters dugout, and they wouldn't surrender. So I bombed them, and then we went down. I found a finger with a ring on it, and the brigadier said if I didn't take the ring, somebody else would. I left that ring as security for my check. But how could you have the courage to let me in for a $2,000 vase? Didn't you realize that the price was absurd and that I might repudiate the transaction? Certainly not. You are responsible for the acts of your servant. You are a true blue sport and would never repudiate my action. You told me what to do, but you did not insult my intelligence by telling me how to do it. When my late brigadier sent me after the German sniper, he didn't take into consideration the probability that the sniper might get me. He told me to get the sniper. It was my business to see to it that I accomplished my mission and carried my objective, which, of course, I could not have done if I had permitted the German to get me. I see, Bill. Well, give that blue vase to the porter in the morning. I'd pay 15 cents for it in a 5, 10, and 15-cent store. Meanwhile, hop into that upper berth and help yourself to a well-earned rest. But aren't you going to a wedding anniversary in Santa Barbara, Mr. Ricks? I'm not, Bill. I discovered a long time ago that it's a good idea for me to get out of town and play golf as often as I can. Besides which, prudence dictates that I remain away from the office for a week after the seeker of the blue vase fails to deliver the goods. And by the way, Bill, what sort of game do you play? Oh, forgive me, Bill, I forgot about your left arm. Say, look here, sir, Bill Peck retorted. I'm big enough and ugly enough to play one-handed golf. But have you ever tried it? No, sir, Bill Peck replied seriously, but it shall be done. The end. Well, that's it for The Go-Getter, a story that tells you how to be one. Hope you got something from it. I know I did. Next week I will be reading As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Tune in next time.